The telegram came with $300 and a photograph so worn the woman's face looked like a ghost. Samuel Garrett held both in his calloused hands, standing in the mud outside the general store while his twin nephews fought over a stick nearby. He'd written to the matrimonial agency 6 weeks ago in a moment of desperation. Midnight, whiskey brave, after another day of watching 7-year-old Jacob and Joel turn feral without a mother's hand. The boys had been with him 8 months now, ever since his sister died of fever and her husband got himself shot over a card game in Amarillo. The woman's name was Catherine Brennan. Irish, the agency said, 26 years old, no family. The photograph showed dark hair and pale skin, but the details had been rubbed away by too many fingers, too many men deciding whether she was worth the investment. Samuel folded the telegram and stuffed it in his coat pocket. $300 was most of what he'd saved from 2 years of breaking his back on a cattle ranch that barely turned profit. But the boys needed schooling, needed decent meals, needed someone who wasn't him. He looked at Jacob and Joel, covered in filth, shouting words they'd learned from the ranch hands. "We're getting married," he announced to no one in particular. The stage was 2 days late, which gave Samuel plenty of time to panic. He cleaned the cabin for the first time since winter, scrubbing floors that hadn't seen a mop in months. He made the boys bathe in the creek, despite their howling protests. He burned 3 shirts trying to iron them himself before giving up and wearing his cleanest work shirt, the one with only 2 patches. Copper Ridge wasn't much of a town, a main street of sun-bleached buildings, a saloon that doubled as a church on Sundays, a general store run by Ida Kowalski, who knew everyone's business before they did. Samuel had lived there 5 years, kept to himself mostly, worked the Broken Creek Ranch for wages that barely covered winter feed for his 2 horses. When the stage finally rattled into town on a Tuesday afternoon, half the population came out to watch. Small towns were like that, starved for entertainment. Samuel stood beside his wagon, hat in his hands, while the boys hid behind him and peeked around his legs. His mouth tasted like copper. The stage door opened. A woman stepped down, and she wasn't anything like the ghost in the photograph. Catherine Brennan was solid and real, with dark red hair pinned up under a plain bonnet and a traveling dress that had seen better days. She was shorter than he expected, rounder in the hips, with freckles across her nose and eyes that scanned the crowd like she was counting threats. She carried 1 small trunk, that was all. "Mr. Garrett," her voice had an accent that made his name sound like music. "Yes, ma'am," he stepped forward, aware of every eye on them. "I'm Samuel. These are my nephews, Jacob and Joel." She looked down at the boys. They stared back with identical expressions of suspicion. "They're filthy," she said. "Yes, ma'am. And you're shorter than I thought." Someone in the crowd laughed. Samuel felt heat crawl up his neck. "Yes, ma'am." Catherine picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing and walked toward his wagon. "Well, let's get this over with. Where's the preacher?" The wedding happened in the saloon with Ida Kowalski as witness and the bartender playing piano badly. Catherine said, "I do," like she was ordering coffee. Samuel's hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the ring, a simple silver band he'd bought from a peddler. Afterward, they rode to the cabin in silence. The boys sat in the wagon bed, whispering to each other and throwing suspicious glances at their new aunt. The sun beat down like a hammer, and dust rose in clouds behind the wheels. Samuel's cabin sat 3 miles outside town, tucked against a rocky hillside with a view of nothing but scrubland and sky. It was small, 2 rooms and a loft, built from pine logs and optimism. The roof leaked. The door hung crooked. There was a garden plot overrun with weeds and a chicken coop that housed 3 hens and a rooster with an attitude problem. "This is it," Samuel said, climbing down. "It's not much." Catherine surveyed the property with an expression he couldn't read. "I've seen worse." She didn't wait for help. She hauled her trunk inside, looked around the main room, the wood stove, the rough table, the 2 chairs with uneven legs, and set her jaw. "Where do the boys sleep?" "Loft. And us." Samuel's face burned. "There's a bed in the back room. I can sleep out here on the floor by the stove. It's no trouble." She turned to face him fully for the first time since the ceremony. Her eyes were green, he noticed, dark green like bottle glass. "I didn't come all this way to make you sleep on the floor," she said, "but don't expect anything more than sharing space. Are we clear?" "Yes, ma'am." "Stop calling me ma'am. My name is Catherine." The boys appeared in the doorway, tracking mud across the floor she'd probably want to clean. "Are you really staying?" Joel asked. He was the bolder twin, the one who asked questions. "I am." "Why?" Catherine crouched down to their level, studying them the way she'd studied the cabin. "Because your uncle paid good money for me, and I always honor a contract. Also because you two look like you haven't had a decent meal in months, and that's a crime against nature." Jacob, the quieter one, spoke up. "Can you cook?" "Better than your uncle, I'd wager." "That's not hard," Joel said. Samuel opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The boy wasn't wrong. Catherine stood, brushing dust from her skirts. "Right, I'll need water from the well, firewood, and someone to show me where you keep the food supplies. Let's see what kind of disaster I've married into." The first week was a war of adjustments. Catherine rose before dawn and worked until dark, attacking the cabin's accumulated chaos with a vengeance that left Samuel feeling useless. She swept and scrubbed, organized and rearranged, cooked meals that actually tasted like food instead of punishment. She mended clothes, fixed the leaning fence around the chicken coop, and somehow got the boys to wash behind their ears without physical combat. Samuel mostly stayed out of her way. He worked long days at the Broken Creek Ranch, herding cattle and mending fence line, coming home after sunset to find supper waiting and Catherine already in the back room with the door firmly closed. They were strangers sleeping in the same small house, circling each other like cautious animals. The boys were different. They watched Catherine constantly, testing her with bad behavior and worse language. She didn't coddle or scold. When Joel tracked mud through the kitchen after she'd mopped, she handed him the bucket and made him clean it himself. When Jacob lied about washing his hands before supper, she dumped his plate in the scrap bucket and sent him to bed hungry. "You're mean," Joel informed her on the fourth day. "I am," Catherine agreed. "And you're filthy. We're all dealing with disappointments here." But Samuel noticed she made their favorite foods without being asked. She left the lamp burning in the loft until they fell asleep. She checked on them in the night when they had bad dreams, though she never mentioned it in the morning. On Sunday, Ida Kowalski came visiting with a basket of preserves and a hunger for gossip. "How's married life treating you?" she asked Catherine, her eyes bright with curiosity. They were on the porch shelling peas. Samuel was in the barn, supposedly fixing a broken bridle, but actually eavesdropping. "It's a marriage of convenience, Mrs. Kowalski, nothing more." "You can call me Ida, and convenience or not, that man needs a wife. Those boys need a mother. Half the women in Copper Ridge would have jumped at the chance. Then they should have answered the advertisement. Too proud, most of them, wanted to be courted properly. But you," Ida paused, "why'd you really come out here, girl? You're educated, I can tell. You had other options." Catherine's hands stilled in her lap. Samuel held his breath. "No," she said quietly, "I didn't." She didn't elaborate, and Ida, bless her nosy heart, had the grace not to push. The turning point came on a Friday night in late May. Samuel came home to chaos. Catherine stood in the yard, face flushed with anger, while Joel sobbed and Jacob glared at the ground. There was blood on Joel's shirt. "What happened?" Samuel dismounted fast, his heart hammering. "Ask your nephews." Catherine's voice was tight. Jacob spoke up. "We didn't mean to, we were just playing." "Playing with a knife," Catherine snapped. "A hunting knife Joel took from your room without permission. He nearly cut his hand off." Samuel looked at Joel's bandaged hand, then at Jacob's defiant face, then at Catherine's furious expression. His first instinct was to defend the boys. They were just kids, accidents happened. But something in Catherine's eyes stopped him. Inside, he told the twins, now. They obeyed, shuffling into the cabin with hunched shoulders. Samuel turned to Catherine. How bad is it? Could have been worse. He'll have a scar. She crossed her arms. I can't do this alone, Samuel. I can cook and clean and mend clothes until my fingers bleed, but I can't teach them everything they need to know. They're boys. They need a man to show them how to be men. I work too much. I know you're trying to save money, trying to build something, but they need you here sometimes. They need to know they matter more than cattle and fence posts. It was the first time she'd said his name without the formal Mr. Garrett. The first time she'd spoken to him like they were partners instead of strangers sharing space. You're right, he said. She blinked, surprised. I am. I've been hiding from them, from you, from all of this. He gestured at the cabin, the life he'd accidentally built. I didn't want this, any of it. The boys, the responsibility, the wife I bought like I was ordering supplies from a catalog, but hiding doesn't change anything. Catherine's expression softened slightly. No, it doesn't. I'll talk to them, really talk to them. Good, she turned toward the cabin, then paused. For what it's worth, I didn't want this either, but we are here now, we might as well make it work. That night, Samuel sat with Jacob and Joel in the loft, and they talked until the lamp burned low. About their mother, about their father, about the anger and fear they carried like stones in their pockets, about rules and respect, and why stealing knives was a good way to lose fingers. From the back room, Catherine listened through the thin walls and allowed herself a small smile. Summer came to Copper Ridge like a fever, baking the land until it cracked. The ranch work intensified, cattle drives, branding, constant battles with weather and predators. Samuel started bringing the boys with him on easier days, teaching them to ride properly, to rope, to handle livestock without getting trampled. Catherine used the quiet time to tend her expanding garden, to learn the names of neighboring ranch wives, to slowly carve out a place for herself in this harsh country. She and Samuel still slept on opposite sides of the bed, a careful space between them. But the space felt different now, less like a barrier, more like patience. They talked more, small things at first. He told her about the ranch, about his plans to maybe buy land someday, run his own cattle. She told him about Boston, about working in a textile mill for wages that barely paid for a boarding house room, about the fire that killed 3 girls and left her blacklisted for speaking out about the conditions. That's why you came, Samuel said one night, sitting on the porch after the boys had gone to bed. You couldn't get work. I couldn't get anything, Catherine stared at the stars. My name was in the newspapers, factory owners wouldn't hire me, I couldn't afford rent. The matrimonial agency was my last option. I'm sorry. Don't be, I made my choices, I'd make them again. She looked at him. What about you? Why the agency? Samuel was quiet for a long moment. I was drowning. After my sister died, I thought I could handle it, thought I could work and raise the boys and keep everything together through pure stubbornness. But they were grieving, and I didn't know how to help them. They needed someone better than me. You're not bad, Samuel, you're just scared. It was the most honest conversation they'd had. It felt like opening a door. In July, the Broken Creek Ranch hosted a summer dance. The whole county came, ranchers and their families, townspeople, drifters passing through. There was a fiddle band, tables of food, lanterns strung between the barn posts. Samuel almost didn't go. He hated crowds, hated small talk. But Catherine had been working on a new dress for 2 weeks, and the boys were wild with excitement, and somehow he found himself wearing his wedding shirt and helping her into the wagon. She looked different. Her hair was down, pinned with wildflowers. The dress was simple blue cotton, but it fit her properly, showed the curve of her waist and the strength of her shoulders. When she smiled at something Joel said, Samuel felt something shift in his chest. At the dance, men kept asking Catherine to partner. She accepted a few times, polite but distant, always returning to where Samuel stood with the boys. He told himself he wasn't jealous. He failed. You should ask her. Ida Kowalski materialized beside him, holding a glass of punch. your own wife, and you're standing here like a fence post. I'm not much of a dancer. Neither is half the men out there, but they're trying. Ida elbowed him. Go on. Before I get ideas about your marriage being faker than a $3 bill. Samuel crossed the barn floor before he could lose his nerve. Catherine was talking to another ranch wife, laughing at something. He waited until there was a pause. Would you dance with me? She turned, surprised. You dance? Badly. Her smile did something to his breathing. Then we'll match. He took her hand, and they joined the other couples as the fiddles started a slow waltz. Samuel kept stepping on her toes. Catherine kept laughing. The boys watched from the food table, whispering to each other with knowing looks. This is nice, Catherine said. Normal. Is it? Close enough. She looked up at him. Thank you for bringing us. Thank you for the dress. You look. He lost the words. Like I tried too hard. Beautiful. You look beautiful. Her cheeks flushed pink, and she didn't look away. They kept dancing, awkward and perfect, until the song ended and the moment passed. But something had changed. They both felt it. August brought drought and trouble. Water sources dried up. Cattle wandered farther looking for grass. Tempers got short when the heat pressed down like a wool blanket. Samuel worked 14-hour days, trying to keep the ranch's herd from dying or straying onto disputed territory where other ranchers might shoot first and ask questions later. Catherine kept the household running through sheer determination. She rationed water, kept the garden alive with recycled washing water, made meals stretch when supplies ran low. The boys helped without being asked now, hauling water from the creek, feeding chickens, doing chores they'd have whined about months earlier. One night, Samuel came home to find Catherine sitting on the porch steps, crying quietly into her apron. He dismounted and sat beside her, not touching but close. What's wrong? Everything, nothing, she wiped her eyes. I'm just tired, the heat, the work, pretending I know what I'm doing here. You're doing fine. I'm not their mother, I'm not your real wife, I'm just, she gestured helplessly, I'm just trying to be enough. Samuel reached out carefully and took her hand. It was rough from work, nothing like the soft hands she'd probably had in Boston. You are enough, he said, more than enough. Those boys love you, he swallowed. I'm glad you came, I'm glad it was you. Catherine looked at their joined hands, even though you paid $300 for a stranger. Best money I ever spent. She laughed, watery and real, and leaned against his shoulder. They sat like that until the stars came out, not saying anything else that needed saying. The drought broke in September, with storms that turned the earth to mud and the creek to a roaring torrent. Catherine was alone with the boys when the flash flood came. Samuel was at the ranch, too far away to help. She heard it first, a sound like thunder rolling closer, and understood immediately. Upstairs, she shouted at Jacob and Joel. Now. They scrambled up to the loft, while Catherine grabbed essential supplies, food, blankets, the lockbox with Samuel's savings. Water was already seeping under the door when she climbed the ladder and pulled it up behind her. The flood hit like a living thing, swallowing the main floor in minutes. It rose to the windowsills before finally stopping, leaving them stranded in the loft, with debris floating past the windows. Joel started crying. Jacob tried to stay brave, but his hands shook. Catherine pulled them both close, wrapped them in blankets, and sang Irish songs her mother had taught her, nonsense lyrics about fairies and green hills and homes they'd never see. They waited for hours. The water receded slowly. When Samuel finally reached the cabin, riding through knee-deep mud in full dark, he found them huddled together in the loft, safe but shaken. Catherine, his voice cracked with fear. We're here, we're all right. He climbed the ladder so fast he almost fell, and then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. The boys piled on, all four of them tangled together, muddy and relieved and alive. I thought I lost you, Samuel said into her hair, all of you. We are tougher than floods, Catherine said, but her voice shook. They stayed in town with Ida Kowalski while the cabin dried out. It took 2 weeks of hard work to make it livable again, clearing mud, replacing damaged floorboards, salvaging what they could. The whole community helped, the way small towns did when disaster struck. On the last day of repairs, Samuel found Catherine standing in the empty main room, looking at the new floor. "I want to stay," she said without preamble. "You are staying." "No, I mean really stay, not as part of a contract or an arrangement, as your wife." She turned to face him. "If you'll have me properly." Samuel closed the distance between them. "Catherine, I've wanted you properly since about a week after you arrived. I just didn't think you wanted the same." "I didn't at first," she smiled. "But somewhere between burning your breakfast and teaching your nephews not to steal knives, I fell in love with this life. With them, with you." He kissed her then, gentle and certain, and it felt like coming home to a place he'd been searching for without knowing. When they finally pulled apart, Jacob and Joel were watching from the doorway with matching grins. "Took you long enough," Joel announced. "We had bets on when you'd figure it out," Jacob added. Catherine laughed, bright and free. "How much did I just cost you?" "Worth it," both boys said together. Winter came early that year, but the cabin was warm. Samuel bought 30 acres of land on credit and started building his own herd. Catherine became known as the best cook in Copper Ridge, trading pies for supplies and goodwill. The boys thrived, growing taller and wilder and loved. On Christmas Eve, the four of them sat around the wood stove while snow fell outside. Jacob and Joel were teaching Catherine a card game with complicated rules they kept changing. Samuel watched them, this accidental family that had become his entire world. "What are you thinking?" Catherine asked, catching his eye. "That $300 was the best investment I ever made." She threw a card at him. "Romance isn't dead after all." The boys groaned. Samuel laughed and pulled Catherine closer, and outside the snow kept falling on Copper Ridge, covering everything in clean white silence. Later, after the boys had gone to bed and the cabin was quiet, Catherine and Samuel stood on the porch, wrapped in the same blanket. The stars were sharp in the cold air, and the wind carried the smell of pine smoke from the stovepipe. "Do you ever regret it?" Samuel asked. "Coming here, marrying a stranger, giving up whatever life you might have had back east?" Catherine was quiet, thinking. "No," she said finally. "That life was killing me slowly. This one," she looked at him, "this one is mine, ours. We built it together from nothing but need and stubbornness." "And $300. "And $300, she agreed, smiling, "though I think I've earned my weight in gold by now." "Double that, at least." They stood together in the cold, watching their land sleep under snow, and neither one mentioned the telegram that had started everything, the worn photograph, the desperate advertisement, the calculated risk that had somehow become love. Inside, a log settled in the stove. The boys dreamed in their loft. The cabin held them all safe and warm. And Catherine Brennan Garrett, who had come west as an unwanted bride, knew with absolute certainty that she was home.